So if you're a pastor and you've thought about writing a book, you might be thinking, well, if I were going to write a book, what book should I write? Or what kind of book should I write? So in this video, I want to give you 3 ideas for types of books you could write, and then a bonus idea. Every pastor, I think, should write a book, and I'm going to talk today about just some ways that you could narrow down your focus and decide which book to write. My name is Lane. This is Preaching Donkey. So awesome to have you joining me today. I've been talking a little bit lately about books because I started a brand new YouTube channel recently all about self-publishing, personal development, and online business. And so I have a free gift for you. If you go to lanesebring.com/5steps, you can pick up my free 5-step guide to writing a #1 best-selling book. I would love to put that in your hands. It's my exact 5 steps that I used to make Preaching Killer Sermons a #1 bestseller in its category on Amazon. Had a lot of fun doing that, learned a ton of lessons, so I want to give that to you. So let's talk about today's content. You're a pastor, you're considering writing a book, but you're not quite sure what book you should write or which book you should write. I want to talk today about 3 types of books that you could write that will help you kind of maybe narrow down. And if you stick all the way to the end, hopefully this video will give you some ideas of what it might look like if you were to write a book and this were to become a reality for you. Sometimes it's hard to decide like which book is the right one for me, which type of book should I write? What direction should I go in right now? What even fits, with being a pastor? Like what type of book would make sense for a pastor to put out there in the world? So with all that, let's jump right in. The first type of book that every pastor should write at some point is a book based on a teaching series that you've done. So this would be basically a general Christian living book. Maybe you've taught a message series that was extremely well received by your church. Maybe it's a message series that you revisit every few years and people just love it and you've made it better over the years. Or maybe you've only preached it once, but you got a great response from it and you really loved preaching it. You could take that preaching series and turn that into a book. There are 2 preaching series that I've done that I'm eventually probably going to turn into a book. One is about spiritual disciplines. I did about a 9-week series on spiritual disciplines. It was really well received. I learned a lot from it. I took a bunch of notes from preaching it and I put it into what is the beginning of a manuscript of a book. The other series that I did that I want to turn into a book was a series that I did years ago called Thrive. Thrive was a series all about abiding in Christ, how he talks about we need to abide in him, and talked about bearing fruit and thriving versus just surviving. And it was a really well-received series. I really love teaching it. I think there's a whole lot there that will really help people. And so that's going to someday be a book. So basically what I have done so far is I took some of those messages and I had them transcribed. So when you take a sermon that you've done, maybe you've got the audio recording of it or you've got the video and you have it transcribed, they're going to take word for word and write down exactly what you said. So that's what I did. I use a service called Rev. It's an app. You can also go to rev.com. I'll link to it in the description. But they're a pretty affordable, pretty consistent transcribing service where you just send them the audio or the video and they have someone write it out for you and send it back to you within about a day. So I did that. I took those notes. I put them into my Scrivener document where my books originate, and I'll go from there. So this is something that maybe you could do if there's something that is kind of inside of you. A Christian living book doesn't necessarily have to be something that you've taught. It could be something that's kind of happening inside of you, something that God is teaching you in your time with him. Could be anything, but the point is a Christian living book is a great direction for a pastor to go if you're trying to figure out kind of, I want to write a book, but what type? A book on a teaching series or a general Christian living book is an awesome way to go. Okay, so the second type of book that you might want to write is simply a book that trains other people how to do ministry. Now, this would fall under the category of church ministry or church leadership. So let's say that you're really good at something. You've been doing ministry for a long time. So maybe you write a book on how to preach, like I've done. Maybe you write a book on how to do pastoral care as people are hurting. Maybe you write a book on how to lead your staff. Maybe you write a book that's designed for new ministers to help them understand how to do ministry. One of the best books I read when I was first starting out in ministry, I was a youth pastor, and I read a book by Doug Fields on how to do student ministry. And the book was called Your First 2 Years in Student Ministry. Amazing, amazing resource for me as a young youth pastor back in those days. I read the book and it was like, oh my gosh, this person understands me and I totally get how to do this. Maybe there's a book like that in it for you. One way to find out is when you mentor younger people in ministry, what are the questions that they're asking you? What do they want to know from you? What kind of problems do they have that you can maybe speak into? What kind of problems do they have that you're already speaking into that you could turn into a book, and all of a sudden you've got not just a conversation with one person, but potentially hundreds or even thousands of people can read it and benefit from it in the future. So in my case, I've written 2 books on preaching. I'm gonna eventually write a book on church revitalization. I was a part of a pretty extensive years-long process of trying to revitalize a church. And so I know the struggles that go with that. So I want to write a book about how to approach church revitalization and some of my experiences with it, and maybe help people with that. Another church ministry related book that I might try to write someday is how to develop systems. This is something that I've done a lot of in the last few years, is to take things that are people dependent and make them systems dependent, so that there's consistency across all of our campuses and all of our ministries, and we lead with more excellence, and we lead through systems that anybody can implement at any level. So that's one of the things that I've done recently with our team, and so I might write a book about that at some point. The point is, just think about what are the things that you really are fired up about in your ministry that you could help someone else with. You don't have to be the best, you don't have to be an expert, it just needs to be your experience that you've had that can help other people solve a problem in the same area. And then finally, number 3, the third type of book that you can write as a pastor is simply an autobiography, an autobiographical book. This could be an amazing opportunity for you to share your story. And this would also model for your people how to tell your story. Now, we always think about the people who write autobiographical books are the ones that have the really cool story. They got the most amazing testimony. God's done some amazing things in their life. They had a horrible upbringing, or they were just a horrible person, and Jesus redeemed them from all that, and everything's great, and they're the ones that need to tell their story, because those stories are the ones that everyone wants to read. And if you have a story like that, that's awesome. It's also really cool if you don't necessarily have the amazing, spectacular, sensational story, but you can tell the story of what God has done in your life, and you can tell it in an interesting way, and it can help other people in their journey. That could really work. And so for me, one day, I don't have any plans of doing this anytime soon, but one day I do want to write a book about my life, my ministry journey, my journey with the Lord, my testimony, the types of churches I've been a part of, the types of churches I've worked in, what I've learned. All of that kind of stuff could really benefit people. I just don't know how to do that just yet. I just don't have a plan for it right now. But this might be something, especially if you're towards the end of your ministry and you're saying, hey, I think I could really help some young people in ministry to get started on the right foot, or be inspired, or be encouraged and uplifted, because maybe you're able to identify with the low points and the high points of ministry. Could be a really cool thing for you to consider. So those are the 3 main ways: Christian living, church ministry, and autobiographical. Now there is a bonus category, and I think this is really exciting, especially if you're in ministry and when you write a book, people are expecting it to be about ministry and church related, or church ministry, or Christian living, or all that stuff we just talked about. You could write a book about something not related at all to church work. Maybe it's a hobby that you have. Maybe it's something that you're interested in. Maybe you're a historian, and so you write historical fiction. I know one pastor who does that, does it very successfully. Maybe you have a particular interest or hobby. Like, for example, for me, I really love to help people self-publish books. I really love to help people with online business. I really love to help people with basic personal development. Not all that stuff is necessarily directly related to ministry, but one of these days I hope to write a book about one or multiple of those topics. And so maybe you could ask, what is it for you? Because this could be an opportunity for you to expand your reach well beyond just the walls of your church and the people who would want to hear from you about your ministry or about Christian living, but it could reach people who don't know anything about you or your church. And it's an opportunity to expand your influence to more people. So those are the types of books that I think every pastor should consider at some point if you're interested in writing a book. So I want to know from you in the comments below. Could you let me know which one of these categories most interests you? If you have an idea for a book, let me know what it might be. So normally on Preaching Donkey, we talk about preaching, we talk about ministry, we talk about all the things related to leadership in the church and preaching. So if you want more content like that, be sure to subscribe. And if you're interested in content about self-publishing, personal personal development, online business, all those kind of things, go to my new YouTube channel, hit subscribe on that channel. It'll really help to grow the reach and influence of that new YouTube channel, and I would much appreciate that. There will be a link in the description and at the top of the comments. Super easy to find. Give this video a like if you found value in it, and I will see you in the next one.